All right, welcome. We're going to talk about complex sentences. This is starts on page 8 in Grammar and Beyond. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to summarize what they say there, but you should use your book. You should read before watching the video or read after watching the video, and of course do the exercises so that you know how to do it. Right, so a complex sentence involves a sentence with one main clause and one dependent clause. Actually, they could have more clauses, but we're going to keep it simple for now. There should be one main clause, and one dependent clause. So obviously, we have to know what that means. So let's look at this sentence, the very first sentence here. Because she studied, she passed. Well, first, how many clauses do you see here? To find a clause, we're going to need subject and verb, right? So I can see right away there's two verbs, and for each of those verbs we have subjects. So it looks like this is one clause, and this is another clause. Okay. Now, unlike compound sentences where you have two clauses and they're totally equal, connected by either a semicolon or a conjunction, one of these clauses is the main one, is the independent clause, is the clause that can stand all by itself, and the other one is what we'll call a dependent clause. It can't stand by itself. So which one? Because she studied or she passed, which one is the main clause? This one is the main clause. She passed is the main clause. Why? Because it's fine by itself. She passed, period. Sentence, simple sentence, it's fine, no problem. This one, because she studied, needs help. It's dependent. It needs to have more after it. So this whole sentence here is a complex sentence with two clauses, one main clause or independent clause, and one dependent clause. One way to tell that you have a dependent clause is because there's this word because before it. And these words, your book calls subordinators. Sometimes you'll see subordinating conjunctions. Examples of subordinators include because, if, when, although, while, since. There are lots of these words. Basically, if it's not a conjunction like fanboy's conjunction, then it's probably, if it's in this kind of position, it's probably a subordinator. Now, personally, I don't like this word subordinator. I don't agree with it. I actually think these words are something different. So I don't care how you identify the word. I don't care whether you ever use the word subordinator again. But what you have to recognize is that there's a main clause here and there's a dependent clause that depends on that. Because I don't want to see you use only this part, because she studied, period. I don't want to see that by itself. It's not a complete sentence. Okay? So the only thing left then is to learn, when we're forming these complex sentences, how can we punctuate them correctly? So this is pretty simple. If the dependent clause comes first, we use a comma. But if the dependent clause comes second, note that there's no comma here. So we can see lots of examples. Because she studied, comma, she passed. She passed because she studied. And either of these sentences are fine. They mean totally the same thing. You can decide which you like better based on context. If she had studied, comma, she would have passed. So we have dependent clause first, independent clause second. Here we have the independent clause first, she would have passed. If she had studied is the dependent clause, so notice that there's no comma. When she studies, comma, she listens to music. She listens to music, no comma, when she studies. Simple, right? The only thing that is a little difficult here is the word although. So when you use the word although in a dependent clause, we actually use a comma even if although comes second. So I could show you this if we just revise this a little bit. So we could say, although she studied, she, probably change this too, she didn't pass, okay? And we could say she didn't pass, although she studied. Now in this case, we still have dependent clause first and dependent clause second, so the comma here is fine. And here we have the independent clause first, dependent clause second. So you might think no comma, but these words like although, even though, words that show contrast, we usually put a comma here. And I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. When we show contrast between things, we often use a comma, even when it's not totally required grammatically. So when you use although or even though, put a comma there, and that's it. Okay, questions on this thing, watch the video again, check out GB starting on page 8, or do the exercises in there, or come to office hours. I'm happy to talk. I love talking about grammar, so if any of this is confusing, just come in and see me. All right, thanks.